A high level of dopamine makes it easy to get involved and easy to concentrate. Every time we have high dopamine, the question of needing discipline automatically disappears. A person with a high level of dopamine doesn't need discipline, they simply don't need it. Discipline, what is discipline anyway? It's coercion, a form of force directed at a person who doesn't understand why they need to do something. On a systemic level, I don't see any reason for it to exist if there are voluntary relationships. Dopamine precisely regulates the sharpness of feelings and sensations, willpower, the sense of satiety, and satisfaction in life. In other words, when dopamine is high, we want things, we want a lot of things. When dopamine is low, we zone out. Here, the sensitivity of the receptors is especially important. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that acts in the here and now. You see, when your dopamine is very high, what happens? Your inner dialogue disappears. You completely immerse yourself in your sensations here and now. Prolactin and dopamine are in a direct inverse relationship. That is, the more prolactin you have, the lower your dopamine, and the more dopamine you have, the lower your prolactin. So it's clear that if your prolactin is high, you're no longer capable of achievements or desires. And testosterone and dopamine are correlated. So when we raise dopamine, testosterone goes up. When we raise testosterone, dopamine goes up. When prolactin rises, both testosterone and dopamine drop. When prolactin drops, testosterone and dopamine rise. Dopamine allows you to perform actions with delayed rewards. When dopamine is low, a person is unable to do large, long-term, or extensive work. They want to do something now and get the reward now. A person physically feels bad when they engage in activities that don't bring them something good right here, right now. Such a person constantly needs positive stimulation. This is the metaphysics of dopamine. Dopamine itself is a kind of currency. A currency that the body uses to pay for fulfilling its needs. Every time you do something that leads you to satisfy one of the three needs, resources, dominance, or sexual success, then the next time you are near, in every sense of the word, the combination of actions that previously led you to one or all of these three things, your body starts producing dopamine. The more basic and significant the needs that are satisfied, the stronger the dopamine attachment becomes. That's why things like eating, browsing the internet, playing games, and so on are so inappropriate when your life is going to shit, you understand? When your life is going to shit, you need to stop and allow all the negativity to pass through. Don't hide from it. Don't bury yourself in primitive pleasures, but allow this negativity to completely overwhelm you. Because if you don't do this, your brain will actually start to think that whenever everything goes to hell, it means you can allow yourself to eat a lot of tasty food and indulge in simple, primitive pleasures. And then you shouldn't be surprised that unconsciously all your actions are aimed at making your life go to hell because you've programmed your brain that way. You explained it to your brain like this: look, now we're doing things that make everything fall apart. And then the person spends the whole day eating, playing, surfing the internet, lying around, doing nothing, which is also a huge form of dominance, lying around and doing nothing. From our body's perspective, it's like, damn, we're fucking kings, because really, only kings for centuries could afford to just lie around and do nothing. Thus, in this way, self-programming for complete self-destruction takes place for complete self-destruction. Accordingly, the metaphysics of dopamine is a way of identifying the most optimal methods for achieving a goal. Dopamine is needed so that, from the monstrous stream of ways to achieve dominance over food resources and sexual success, we can select and adopt the most effective, the most productive ones. One of the best ways to increase dopamine is to sort things out in your own mind. But this is a very big topic. We will not be touching on this today. Physical triggers for dopamine: hunger, cold, abstinence, a hard life. When there's a hard life and there is an understanding of what to do to make this hard life end, that's when dopamine is released. A lot of dopamine is released. The main primary psychological trigger for dopamine is the approach to dominance, sex, and food resources. Cortisol leads to flaccid skin. And of course, cortisol leads to both physical and mental incapacity. A person cannot work for long. A person cannot do anything properly. And the most important thing is, of course, the degeneration of all the body's tissues. That is, hair starts to fall out, injuries heal poorly, inflammations don't go away, all illnesses become chronic, and recovery does not occur. Psychological manifestations of cortisol: nervousness. This leads to very high irritability. In other words, you can't control your emotional urges, you can't control your emotional impulses. High cortisol also leads to suspiciousness and anxiety. Cortisol is the body's currency for things that are unnecessary. That is, those actions that lead to a reduction in our food resources, a decrease in our dominance, to the reduction of our dominance. And let me remind you, there are 5 paths to dominance, 5 paths to power. That is, any losses in reputation, losses of image, losses of money, losses of health, all the events, all the actions that occurred shortly before the reduction of our DSP, and I'll use DSP for convenience so you understand: dominance, sexual success, food resources, everything that led to a decrease in DSP will be marked by cortisol. What are the triggers for lowering cortisol? There is only one trigger for lowering cortisol, and that is food. Well, to be precise, it's the entry of sugar into the cell. What physical procedures are there for lowering cortisol? It's interaction with heat. If you need to lower cortisol, you should simply put yourself in greenhouse-like conditions. This means constantly taking hot baths, saunas. It means your home should always be warm, your feet should always be warm. This is an impact on the fundamental foundations of the body. Regarding ice baths in the morning, an ice bath makes a healthy person more stress resistant. A broken person, someone who is already exhausted, it finishes them off. About adrenaline. What matters to us is not the amount of adrenaline in our blood, since its level is constantly changing. We need to control it, to control the intensity of its release. In other words, a healthy psyche is when adrenaline is produced only in truly dangerous situations. And an unhealthy psyche is when adrenaline is produced in response to any potentially dangerous situation. This needs to be brought under control. And we control the level of adrenaline release through serotonin. Well, the psychological trigger is obvious. So, look, when we raise our rank depends on our DSP. If we have consistently high DSP, we have a consistently high rank. If we don't have DSP, our rank is low. If DSP is sometimes present and sometimes not, then we have an average rank. And depending on our rank and depending on the situation, of course, in response to danger, we have 3 programs: flight, stupor or paralysis, and fighting. Fight or flight, kill or be killed. It depends on the balance of adrenaline and noradrenaline. When adrenaline and noradrenaline are 50-50, so to speak, a person freezes. They don't know whether to attack or to run. When it's just adrenaline, that means you need to run right away. When it's just noradrenaline, you go forward, you fight. Accordingly, the metaphysics, the catechism of adrenaline triggers the flight response. A person who cannot control their noradrenaline sooner or later becomes incapable of enthusiasm, of engaging in hard, demanding work. Adrenaline, noradrenaline, and dopamine are very closely connected to each other. The physical manifestations of adrenaline are contraction. Adrenaline causes blood vessels to constrict, and in the same way, it causes the body to contract. Noradrenaline, and accordingly, when a person is frightened, they turn pale. When a person gets angry, it is specifically anger that regulates noradrenaline. When noradrenaline is involved, the person flushes red because the blood vessels dilate and the person also expands in space. Well, roughly speaking, the higher the testosterone, the more likely a person is to respond to danger through noradrenaline. What is the psychological trigger for noradrenaline? Danger. The same danger, fear. If he's frightened, he jerks, he shakes it off his fingers. Like this. If a person is experiencing noradrenaline-driven danger rather than adrenaline, their movements are smooth and broad. Noradrenaline is, roughly speaking, the hormone of a predator. You need to aim and deliver a single precise blow, to strike, to kill. And adrenaline is the hormone of flight. Catechism, the metaphysics of norepinephrine, is the implementation of the program of murder, the implementation of the program of beating. About estradiol. Physical manifestations of high estradiol levels. If the manifestation of prolactin is roundness, that's estradiol. It causes female pattern obesity. What is female pattern obesity? It's a protruding butt. Female breasts or something resembling female breasts. And most importantly, estradiol causes a specific feminine plasticity, a mannerism. Many people tend to consider such individuals as gay or suspect them of homosexuality. That's not the case at all. They just have this kind of plasticity caused by this female sex hormone. Estradiol regulates hair growth on the head. Intellectual activity is only possible when we have clarity and sharpness of mind. Estradiol causes constant shifts in emotional state. The psychological manifestations of estradiol are emotionality and an intolerance to psychological stress. So estradiol leads to a person becoming very vulnerable to psychological attacks. In other words, testosterone means being completely unshakable. Estradiol also regulates emotional outbursts, the ability to have emotional explosions. And as I already mentioned, estradiol causes an inability to concentrate. And primitivity, estradiol regulates primitivity just like testosterone does. Intuition. What are the triggers that control estradiol? It's cold, and any kind of struggle in every sense. Estradiol-driven people are filthy fucking manipulators. And when we teach ourselves to fight head-on, one-on-one, to move forward, in this way we also annihilate estradiol. Psychological triggers for estradiol: idleness, inaction. See you soon.